So if you've been following us on social media, then you have already met Joanna and you've learned a little bit about her. She holds a master's degree in health and social change from the USC Annenberg School of Communication, and she is currently studying for her arborist certification. She was formerly trained in fruit tree care at the Huntington Ranch and also worked in edible gardens in South Los Angeles with the Ron Finley Project. And it was during this time Joanna realized how underserviced and mismanaged fruit trees in Los Angeles were, but also noticed that there was this void in knowledge on, how to actually care for them properly. So with the mission of teaching people that all fruit trees need specialized care to grow great fruit, she started Fruitstitute. So tonight we are looking forward to learning more about how to care for our home orchards in order to maintain healthy and abundant fruit trees. So without further ado, I present Joanna Glovinsky.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let me get this screen share. Hold on a second. There we go. And let's pull this up and hold on. That's not what I want. Tech today, huh? Let's see. Here we go. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for that intro. And I really enjoyed the plant entries. Those were so cool. Some of those succulents, I want them. But as for fruit trees, I have grapefruit, orange, lemon, persimmon, apples, plums, and a pomegranate in my yard. Ooh, and my most favorite figs in Los Angeles. But as a good friend of mine says, the shoemaker's kids never has any shoes. So mine are not the perfect specimens. They're not my showcase trees. My clients have my showcase trees. Anyway, yeah, thank you for that intro. That was perfectly my story. I like to say I graduated with my master's degree in communications and came out a gardener, as life usually happens. So a little bit about Fruitstitute and what we do. We are the only fruit tree specialist service operating in Los Angeles County. So technically we're like the only people that you can call who can properly prune and feed your fruit trees. So we do specifically fruit trees and only fruit trees. And there's plenty of them in Los Angeles that need us. So far, we launched the business, or I launched the business in March 2018, and it has grown exponentially. And I'm just honestly trying to keep up with it. As of today, we have over 800 clients that we've seen, and most of our clients we either visit annually or seasonally. And that's because fruit trees, most varieties of fruit trees, if they're commercially cultivated, which we're going to delve right into all the details of what that means, they need maintenance annually or seasonally, depending on the variety. So we have the opportunity to go back to these properties year after, or like season after season, or year after year. And I've been on a lot of properties in LA, and there are some things about the landscape industry that I think we can improve upon. And I'm going to be talking about that and how to get us to think about creating more ecologically minded approaches to growing plants. But also about Fruitstitute, we do practice agroecological principles. And so we make our compost and our mulch in-house. It's called Chocolate Thunder Compost and Mulch Love, and it is our secret sauce. We work soil just as much as we work the canopy of a tree. And that's because we're growing edibles technically. So we are really thinking about our soil, and there is no tree that we touch that does not get composted and mulched, because the health of a tree starts with the roots and the soil, and good fruit comes from healthy soil. So as I like to say, the proof is in the fruit. We have pretty high client retention, or good high client retention rates. So a lot of our clients we've been working with for 3 years. And it's so cool and so fun to go back to these properties. And this year, like I've had the best stone fruit of my life on these trees that we've been working on for 3 years. So it's working, thank God. Anyway, so today, what we're going to be talking about, and I know it's kind of a vague topic, fruit trees ins and outs, but this is what I'm constantly preaching. This was the impetus for me to start this business. And anybody who works with trees, they're tree seers, and they know that most of our trees in Los Angeles are pretty poorly managed. And I think that fruit trees, and I think anybody who works with trees would likely agree with me, fruit trees are especially mismanaged. And so once I started getting into the garden and I realized that fruit trees are my thing, and I spoke fruit tree, this job just kind of found me. So I like to say that a business fell into my lap, and that's what happened. I had to run with it. So for our talk tonight, I want to pose an argument to you all, because you guys all seem to know plants. If you're part of the Southern California Horticultural Society, you're into plants, you see plants, you care about growing plants. And I would like to get us to think about how landscape professionals and those of us working in landscapes understand our plants and our landscapes. So the nature of my business is growing trees. And I often find that there's a big disconnect in the industry. We have landscapers installing plants and creating Insta gardens, and landscapers are the ones who plant trees. Arborists really take down more trees than they plant. Like, arborists are here to manage trees, and to any arborist, one of the basic tenets of arboriculture is right tree for the right place. And unfortunately, time and time again, we don't see that. So arborists are technically they're repurposed to remove trees, and we have landscaper planting trees, but who's growing these plants in our landscapes? The maintenance crews. And that's not a specialized skill. So for us who are going back to these properties quarterly, annually, irrigation issues, seeing sprinklers, watering grass, watering trees, fancy plants in fruit tree root zones. So it's something that I think that us as plant people and those of us working in the landscape industry, I think that we need to understand and know our plants better. And I think fruit trees are a great vehicle and kind of example of a misunderstood plant that we put in our landscapes often. So I'm going to present the thesis of the business to you all, and I really welcome your critiques and questions. So let's get going. So what makes a fruit tree a fruit tree? Why is a fruit tree different from all other trees? I feel like that's a Passover question at the Seder. But fruit culture begins with grafting, and fruit culture is like the art of, or not the art, but it's the practice of growing fruit. So there's horticulture, arboriculture, fruit culture. So the definition of grafting, we could say, here's a good one. It's the natural or deliberate, let me move my thing. So yeah, the natural or deliberate fusion of plant parts so that vascular continuity is established between them, and the resulting genetic composite organism functions as a single plant. So basically, it's creating a composite genetic system by uniting two or more distinct genotypes, each of which maintains its own genetic identity throughout the life of the grafted plant. So the key to grafting, I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that it's two different plants that live together as one. So there's no genetic mixing. The DNA doesn't change. How do we do that? We do that. Hold on. Okay. So this is how grafting works. We have the rootstock, and the rootstock are the roots of a tree that is climate appropriate, disease resistant, size appropriate. And then we take the scion of the tree that we want. So like a Meyer lemon, for example, and we meld the two together via the vascular system, and then they grow as one. So there's two different kinds of grafting, and what they say, people have been doing this forever, and they say that people started grafting, like the theory is that the hypothesis is that we started grafting because this happens all the time in nature. So way back in the day, when, way in BCE times, one hypothesis is, or a commonly written about hypothesis is, people were taking branches from trees, sticking them in the ground to create shelter over their heads, and they see these plants grow together. And so that set people off to see like, oh, well, we could probably make this happen too. So why do we want to do, so that's natural grafting. And then deliberate grafting is how we grow fruit trees and many other ornamental woody plants. And so why does that happen for fruit trees? Like, this is the distinction between fruit trees and other trees, is that woody plants, or sorry, not fruit trees and other trees, but for trees, how we make trees, woody plants, they're heterozygote, so they're not true to seed. So you could have a delicious Meyer lemon, and you take that seed and you put it in the ground. Many avocados, like avocado seeds sprout so easy, but you're not going to get that Hass avocado. You're not going to get that Meyer lemon. How do you get that Meyer lemon or that Hass avocado in the most similar, like the most similar version of that fruit? You take a cutting of the tree and then you graft it onto your rootstock. Grafting is different than propagation, which is taking a cutting, planting it in the ground so that it roots. Those are figs. Pomegranates you can do that with. But if you want, so figs, pomegranates, a bunch of fruit trees that are common in our landscapes are propagated from cuttings, which is a different kind of tree that does survive in the wild pretty much. Peaches, lemons, oranges, those specific varieties or species of fruit trees, those won't survive in the wild. So the other thing that's different is hybridization. So hybridization is when genetics get mixed. And you do that by taking, like, a lot of tomatoes are hybridized. And so the DNA of those plants are mixed together. Whereas a grafted tree is two separate trees growing together as one. So basically, grafting, when we started doing this, grafting allowed for the domestication of woody plants. So a brief history on the history of grafting, which I think is a fascinating story. This is, so with grafting, there are limits to compatibility. And I think that is where the art comes in, is you can't put a lemon on an oak and have the two of them grow together. So way back when, people were curious and constantly experimenting with what trees are genetically compatible. And so Robert Sherrock, so in early 1600s, with the advent of the printing press and widespread literacy, that information of genetic compatibility was able to be shared across cultures, across communities, across people. And this guy was one of the first, he was a monk in a church in England, and he was very much a rationalist. And he basically did a literature review on published documentation on grafting prior to that point. So like the bigger works. And he found that there was a lot of bogus information in there. There's a great book called Natural Magic, written by some Italian in like the 15th century, that was a leading source on grafting. And he's like, yes, you can graft willows and apples and all these things, but you can't. So at this point in time, grafting was really an art. And I love this quote because it kind of just describes like the way that our history of growing fruit, the ethos of it. So industry and art may bring materials and place them fitly for it, but nature works them. And therefore, as one saith, it is the great art of man to find out the arts of nature. So grafting across the time was, or like way back in time, was a learned kind of cultural aristocratic thing, because those who were doing it, and well, basically those who were writing about it, were the ones who were experimenting. But we have these ornate orchards and palaces in Italy and Rome and Greece, and so it was very much a higher level prestigious thing. And it was a cultural, all cultures have agricultural doctrines. And agriculture was something that people always wrote about because it was a reflection of the technology of their civilization. So what we find is that people were grafting across the world from very, very, very long ago. Everyone was doing it and everyone was writing it and writing about it. So the fun fact, first cultivated fruit crops were grapes, olives, figs, and date palms. And at the time, well, let's jump into this. So basically the earliest verifiable written account on grafting is the Hippocratic Treatise, the ancient Greece and Persia, written in 424, and it's about grafting grapes. The Chinese are actually suspected to have the oldest account on grafting. They even have text on grafting for orchards and grafting for courtyard trees and the different techniques to use. Alexander the Great, responsible for bringing dwarfing rootstock to Asia Minor. They were able to tell, like historians and archaeologists were able to tell some of like those heavily traveled trade routes and trading posts because of the strange gathering of trees that they would find in these kind of settlements. Mainly with olives, they would find interesting rootstocks and interesting scions, which was an indication that like people were trading these things. So yeah, so the 424 BCE is as far back as we have written documentation on, but it's something that people have been practicing for centuries, obviously. So as I mentioned, 16th century, we get the widespread adoption of the printing press and increased literacy, and lots of literature gets published on grafting and fruit culture. And this is personally one of the best book titles I came across. And this was actually from the article that I read. He wrote a lot about like the more prominent publications. So this wasn't just included in this article for the great book title, but it's A New Orchard and Garden, or the best way for planting, grafting, and to make any ground good for a rich orchard, particularly in the North. So at this point in time, knowledge on grafting is spread across the world, and there's a boom in orcharding and advancements in understanding how grafting actually works. So those limits of compatibility become less so because people are sharing this information. And Sherrock, the author I quoted from in the previous slide, was kind of the first rationalist to be like, all this other stuff is bogus. These are things that we do know. This is the experimentation that we have. This works. So like you can graft apples and pears. You can do cocktail trees when put multiple grafts on a compatible rootstock, but everything needs to be compatible. So once we start having the expansion of this knowledge, orchards and fruit growing really starts becoming an economic an engine for economic growth. And fun fact, Johnny Appleseed is a descendant of the Huguenot families in France, and they were actually persecuted by some Louis at the time because they had such excellent technology in growing their apples. So they were said to have created apple trees that were short enough and really easy to be harvested, that were the fruit was ripe at the same time so they could bring it all to market. They had a branch architecture that allowed them to pick most of the fruit. And so then they got really rich, and Louis didn't like that and they get kicked out. Many go to the Netherlands, they go all over the place. A group of them go to the Americas, and the Appleseed family establishes the first apple orchards in what is now Queens, New York. So from there, all of these technological advancements in fruit culture really create, as I said, this economic boom, and fruit culture becomes an economic industry and really kind of moves as an art into a science. So come the 19th century, we have industrialization and basically growing fruit, orcharding gets completely mechanized. And the fruit industry, as we know it, is born at this time. So fruit starts growing into a much larger economy, and we have agribusiness. So really at that point is when those fruit trees become designed for mechanization. So uses of grafting, what do humans generally want in a fruit tree? I think one of the points that I'm trying to make is that this is really subjective in nature, and really the metrics of what we say is a good fruit tree are defined by those who are writing the books. And basically the fruit trees that we know today they've evolved with humans and our desires for fruit. But in general, I think that we can all kind of agree upon these basic attributes of what we're looking for. We obviously want like tasty, delicious, good sized fruit. New cultivars, like good variety, Santa Rosa plums turn into nectar plums, and having fun with that and creating interesting cultivars of fruit. Harvestability, we want trees that can be easy to harvest. For a homeowner, we don't need a fruit tree that's 12, 15 feet tall. Fruit trees are short for that reason. We want to, it sucks harvesting fruit in a tree that has thorns. They bite. So yeah, we're looking for good access. Avoidance of juvenility. So growing trees from seed really takes a long time. If you can take a cutting of a Meyer lemon that is already fruiting and put it on a relatively mature tree, you're going to get fruit in a few years versus all the time it takes to grow a tree from seed. Arbor sculpture, that's actually the malleability of the branches. So if you think of espalier forms, with fruit trees in particularly, we want that malleability because we need to train the trees to grow with certain forms to maximize light and airflow, to make them pickable. Today in the commercial industry, we grow trees flat so that they're easy to be vacuumed up by the machine that harvests. Size control, obviously, we want shorter trees so that we can pick them. And biotic and abiotic stress resistance. So that's pest and disease resistant. So example of this would be now they're making rootstocks that are resistant to fire blight, which affects the apple and pear, the rosacea family of trees, and will take out industries. So if we can breed out the genes, or if we can find rootstock that is resilient to these common infestations that can take out a crop, obviously that's a good thing. So what is considered desirable in fruit culture, as I mentioned, really depends on who's writing the book, who are the authors. And this changes according to the industry of growing fruit. So today, who's doing this, right? It's really the commercial growers. And fruit is a science, and it has become a commodity. And so I think it's interesting to think about that, like the basic business model of an orchard is the equation of viability. And that's if 1 bushel of fruit is greater than 1 square foot of real estate. So orcharding, again, orcharding is really about real estate. But that's what farming is about in general. So if we're thinking of fruit in a commodity term, we need to always be thinking about reducing costs and thinking about development. Like LA used to all be orchards, but then real estate prices go up. And so our farms get farther and farther away. So now the literature on growing fruit is about commercial growing, and growing fruit is really in the world of economists, like economy and science. And those who are writing the book are academic institutions or agribusiness institutions who are doing research on how to create fruit trees that are going to be the most viable commercially. So now when we're thinking about, so this is a new roots or peach that they're developing that grows sideways. Its branches are it's grafted to grow almost as an espalier, because now we want our fruit trees to look like this, to basically be two-dimensional, to be really easy to mechanize. So now if like metrics of good fruit, good quality fruit trees are those that kind of work the best for mechanization. So it's all about reducing labor costs, essentially. So even like my business model has no application commercially. It could take my team an hour to thin a fruit, like a peach tree. It's super labor intensive. So obviously they need to reduce their labor costs. And so the best way to do that is to make trees that need less human attention. And they want apples or fruit that's going to color at the same time, going to be ripe at the same time, because they're going to bring in their people to pick on foreign visas, which is mainly the labor in the orcharding industry. So they bring these temporary workers in, and they're there for 2-3 weeks just to do the picking. And so you need all of your fruit ready at a certain time. Now there's that machine, for example, and in the photo is it knows the fruit is ripe by the color of the apple. So it has a little computer that can recognize which ones need to be picked. Another thing that the commercial orchard industry is looking for in a fruit tree is managing the inputs that the farm needs. So they are going to put down a bunch of fertilizer, sprays, all these things. If we can develop rootstocks that basically can grow with little soil nutrients and have less phosphorus deficiencies and need less calcium, or we have a cheaper input for this specific macronutrient, and this tree has roots that make it especially bioavailable. Those are the metrics that the commercial grower and the fruit trees designers are looking for. They're also looking for fruit that can sit in cold storage for a while, because they're going to pick all these apples, and then most orchards can't bring all their fruit to market at one time, I'm assuming. But I know that most apples, stone fruit, things like that, they sit in cold storage for as long as the fruit will allow. So if we have varieties of fruit that can withstand that cold storage longer and longer and longer, then that makes the business more viable. Obviously, we want fruit that transports well. I think that we are all very disserviced, especially with the avocado industry. John, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but what you get in the store are thick-skinned avocados, and there's such an amazing world of avocados. Like, I would love to be able to have a thin-skinned, buttery, big avocado that transports well, because they're magic. So it minimizes the varieties that we're looking for, and marketing. So they're looking for trees that focus group well. Basically, the apples that we know in the store are the ones that our eyes are going to be attracted to. This is a great diagram of the apple marketing industries and the different suppliers of lots of apples that are pretty much like closest to the Honeycrisp apple. But people really like all of the fruit that we see in the grocery store and bigger grocery stores. It's all been focus grouped. The naming, the color, the texture. So that's the fruit market. So I think that where we're going, or like what the point I'm also trying to get across is that fruit trees are really, they're a conception of humans and they evolve with our desires. So they're designed, inherently designed to be managed by us. And this is an art and a science that we create these trees. And so we also need to tend to these trees. When left like you most, and again, I'm speaking specifically to commercially cultivated varieties that are grafted, citrus, a lot of avocados, stone fruit, apples, pears, persimmons, things, those kinds of trees. So you can't just plant those and leave those, because if you do, they end up looking like the really sad looking trees in this photo. And like if you see trees and you see mismanaged trees, you probably notice that a lot of the mismanaged trees in LA landscapes are fruit trees. And it's to me, in my opinion, I think it's because people don't understand that basic concept that like you can't plant it and leave it. It requires something unique and special. And so we have to know our plants a little better. So what do we need to consider when we're adding fruit trees to a landscape? Well, first of all, most fruit trees, this is citrus and there's a bunch of stone fruit in there. Most trees that grow in the forest, they don't naturally have branch desiccation, which is the dieback of wood. Citrus, if you don't clean out that dead wood annually, or I mean, best time to do is annually, citrus naturally grows in layers. And so it gets super, super, super dense. And then the inside of the tree, it dies from the inside out for that reason. So you have to clean out that dead, diseased, and damaged wood to keep the tree happy and healthy, but to also have good light and airflow in there so that it can grow fruit. So fruit trees do need regular pruning. And if you don't do that, we have issues later on. So one of the really essential things to growing these orchard cultivated species of trees is to put in formative pruning. And I like to say it's raising a fruit tree right. You're putting in a nice balanced branch architecture that's species specific so that the tree can grow in a healthy fashion. You train a tree to grow with a good branch architecture, you're extending that tree's longevity just in that little work you do in the first few years on a small tree. You're setting yourself up for success 40, 50, 60, 70 years later. So starting right is critical. Also planting the right tree in the right place, which is the fundamental for tree management. But if we don't do that, fruit trees specifically can kill themselves, essentially. This is what happens if you leave a tree unattended to in the wild. Well, a peach tree, obviously. Fruit trees overbear, stone fruit overbears. They're designed to do that. They're designed to have their fruit thinned. If you don't have that nice balanced branch architecture, fruit is really heavy. We're going to get an imbalance in weight, and those branches that are falling down here, those are going to snap right off. If you don't thin this fruit, the quality of the fruit is not going to be what we're looking for in a fruit tree. Also, if it's a young tree, and even older trees that overbear will tend to produce a lot less in subsequent years. Proper care, you can correct course, which is a lot of what we do, but avoid it from the very beginning. Train the tree to grow right. Understand when and how to prune your trees. And when it's fruiting, be attentive. Thin the fruit, specifically stone fruit, apples. Those guys, that fruit needs to be thinned, or else your tree is going to break.
Joanna,
yeah.
We do have a question.
Okay.
This is from Jerry. He says, my Mexicola and bacon avocados and Washington navel orange produced poorly last fall and winter. They had been good producers for the past 15 years and appear to be well on track for another good year. Can the cooler June and July weather in 2020 be a factor in this?
if he's, I probably avocados, typically it's a water issue. They're tropical trees. If they produce poorly, it could be, avocados generally don't overbear. They will set what they can handle. It could be a weather thing for sure. I think if it did really well, and if you didn't feed it, which is what we're going to talk about next, fruit needs a lot of soil nutrients. So if after your tree gives you a good crop, you have to make sure that you restore the soil nutrients that it took to make that crop. So with avocados, it's generally water, heat. Those are the two bigger things. And then soil nutrition. They're hungry. They've got shallow feeder roots. So it depends on their context in the landscape as well. So I would definitely, we're about to talk about root zones, which I think applies here. So we also are looking for, with fruit trees, they need so much more soil nutrients than an ornamental tree. And I learned this empirically. So I have only one client, I planted ornamental trees for in the first year of business. And it's because we did this really cool agroecological orchard. So we planted ornamentals for shade and wind block for the fruit trees. And I think we planted 15 gallon or 24-inch 4-inch boxes, but you can see, so here's the acacia. The photo on the left is planting day in April 2019. Photo on the right is a year later. I'm sorry, I don't have a full photo of it. This is the best one I can find, but I do think you can tell, like, this tree's grown times 3, 4. Another one we did, purple Robe locust. Photo on the left, planting day. You know, it's a manageable tree. My team could plant it. And technically we're landscapers, we're not a tree service. So we don't use any heavy machinery. We don't climb trees because fruit trees are small. And then the photo on the right, you can see it in 2020 and it's exploded, and it's literally times 4 the size it was when we planted it. And that first year we treated it like we would a fruit tree. We composted it and mulched it. We didn't fertilize because we don't do that in year 1, but you know, we loved it the same way we love all of our fruit trees. And then that year later, I was like, oh my God, these trees are exploding. Stop feeding it. They're fine. In contrast, here's an apple that we planted the same day. And then the year later, the apple's grown times 2, times 3. You know, it's going to start producing fruit. And what that means is it takes a lot of resources from the soil to grow fruit. Fruit is sweet. Fruit is delicious. Fruit is nutrient dense. It needs more resources than an acacia, than most ornamental or anything intended as a landscape tree. It's been designed to be food for us. So we've created it, we've designed them to kind of be pretty resource intensive in what they need from the soil. Here's a citrus tree that we planted. And a year later, it's grown not even times 2. And today, these trees are all doing really well, and they're all highly productive. And all the ornamental trees, I'm just shocked at how big they are. And now my team can't prune them anymore and keep them a little smaller because they're just too big. So we have to call a tree service to come probably next year to handle those bigger trees. But so to break it down, the other thing about fruit trees, and I see this so often in landscapes, is plants in root zones. Fruit trees, again, they need so many soil, like so much more soil nutrients than other trees. And people don't know that plants growing in the root zone of the tree, which is the area under the canopy where most of the tree's absorbent roots are. Those are the roots that take up water and nutrients from the soil. They're competing with those trees for nutrients. So like natives love them, but they are so competitive in a landscape, and you plant natives next to your fruit trees or even in the root zone of your fruit trees, and that ain't gonna go. Like, your tree ain't gonna produce good fruit at all. Also, we see lots and lots of street trees, and they're concrete in the root zone, and they can, they're fine. I mean, they're not fine, but they survive and they'll live a long time. Fruit trees really need to have really good soil in their root zone and be well mulched with woody mulch. Time and time again, we see DG in root zones or gravel in root zones, and those trees are just not taking up the proper amount of nutrients from the soil to be healthy, but also to grow good fruit. So if any of you are wondering what's up with your trees, if they're not doing what you want them to do, I'd say the first place is to look at the root zones, what's happening down there. And the key to growing good fruit is compost and mulch. And that is, you're putting soil biology into the soil. And wood chip mulch keeps water in the soil. You really, growing anything is about growing soil, but especially any edible, you need to grow your soil first. It all starts down below.
Joanna, we do have 2 questions.
Yes.
One is from Ellen, that she had a similar question to Jerry's first one regarding her stone fruit. So this year the crop was very small. Do you have any, can you diagnose over Zoom what could possibly have happened?
No, I can't. Yeah, so how my business works is we do consultations. During the consultation, we will do a tree assessment and tell you what's going on. We need to see a tree to be able to diagnose it. We need to see how it is in the landscape. Where, like, do you have an avocado in full sun surrounded by DG? That avocado is going to get fried. Do you have a citrus in full sun? I mean, obviously DG in root zone isn't good, but like avocados don't work with DG. Citrus, they can manage, not a good thing. As long as DG is outside of the canopy drip line of the tree, it can handle it. I need to see what other things are happening in the landscape. I need to see what the leaves look like. Are they big? Are they small? Are you overwatering, underwatering? What is your irrigation? Huge thing that is one of the hardest things for my business is this misunderstood irrigation management in LA landscapes. We see sprinklers right up on the trunks of trees. You want your wood chip mulch to rot. You don't want your tree trunk to rot. Wood and water creates rot. We see grass irrigation, irrigating our trees, and irrigation is so critical to the success of your trees. And it is super important right now that we're in a drought, that we keep our trees healthy and that we know these basic things about our trees, because our trees will keep our landscapes cooler, and our trees will keep more water in our landscapes and will keep our plants alive if we keep our trees healthy. So if water your trees, if you take anything away from me tonight, wood chip mulch, compost, and water your trees in this hot summer. I personally have fear that we're gonna lose a lot of trees this summer. So I hope you all tell 10 people, cut back on irrigating everything else, learn how to properly irrigate your trees, and everything else is going to do better. It's super important that we keep our trees healthy in drought times.
Amen to that. I do
what's
have
the second question?
2 more questions. Yes.
Yeah.
They're from Jerry. One is, are there root zone companion plants that do not compete?
No, there's not for fruit trees. If you think about, and we're going to go into this, but fruit trees are designed to be in rows in an orchard. You can put companion plants are great outside of the root zones. Like you do cover crops in any commercial growers do cover crops in between the rows. Cover crops, this ecological orchard that I showed you photos of, we have cover crops growing in between our trees as well. But no, there's nothing that you should have growing in the root zones of your trees. And again, this is the area under the tree's canopy. So beyond the canopy drip line, fair game. Natives are really hard. Natives are super, like, yes, natives all the way. But if you don't stay on top of the maintenance, those natives are going to take right over. Is there another question?
Yes, Jerry also wants to know about worm castings.
Yes.
The hydroponics store have bulk bags for less than $1 a pound. How do
Yes.
those?
No. Yes, but no. So compost is soil biology, right? And biology is alive. All living things need air and water. If it's in plastic, it's not breathing. I don't know how people sell compost in plastic. I do believe that there's some good technology that has been able to like dry it. I don't know, an inoculant. It's almost like taking a supplement, I'd say. And supplements, it's really hard to find good ones that do become bioavailable to our bodies, as well as to your trees. So compost is alive. Living things don't survive when you seal them in plastic. But worm castings, yes, yes, yes. Worm castings build soil structure. We make a worm casting compost tea, which is like fairy dust. It has turned trees, like dying trees, around in 48 hours. You can never overdo it with compost. It's just like us. You can never, like, the more biology you have in your gut, the more bioavailable the nutrition and the food that we eat, the more our bodies can absorb those things. So yes, compost in plastic, or compost that isn't living, might be a waste of money. If it's $1, go for it. Why not? See what happens.
There's one more from Sandy.
Yeah.
Can fruit trees be grown in containers?
It depends. Generally, no. You're not going to have a lot of fruit. Kumquats, they're tiny. The trees produce a lot of fruit. I think that kumquats are fine for containers. Avocados, hell no. Stone fruit, if you want like 5, 6 peaches, sure. And that's because we need to keep our canopy size proportional to the size of the container, so that we have the roots are proportional to the leaves. So there's always this thing, a root leaf constraint. And we need to have photosynthesis from leaves be equal to the water and nutrient absorption capacity of the roots. So those things need to be in proportion, or roots, if there's more space for roots, better. And the tree's just gonna be healthier and be able to take up water, more water and nutrients. But we don't want our canopy to be bigger than our root space. That's something we see all the time. With ornamental trees, it's not as much of an issue. And I would say that's because they don't need the same kind of soil nutrients, because they don't make fruit for us to eat. But for fruit trees, the more root space you can give them, the better and healthier and tastier better, healthier your tree is going to be, and then the fruit will be tastier. So I'm going to move on, and there should be time for questions at the end. So again, I think we've definitely established now that fruit trees are designed to be managed by humans. So we basically, to successfully grow a fruit tree, we need to understand that they need specialized care. So this is problem number one. And I think as landscape professionals, or anybody, you all are plant people, this needs to be common knowledge. You can't plant it and leave it. If it's a fig, sure. If it's a citrus, no. If it's stone fruit, definitely not. They're like the ballerinas of fruit trees. But then there's a part 2. And the part 2 that I would like us to consider is the different. So those who have written the books on fruit tree care are writing for commercial purposes. As orcharding became an economy, and agribusiness became a big institution, the scientists and economists, those are the ones who are funded by the nation state, or, you know, by agribusiness. And so they're writing the information and establishing the standards of practice on fruit tree care. However, growing fruit in your landscape is a much different thing. The purpose of the tree is different. So there's two different standards of viability. And so if we look, so commercial trees, like if you're growing fruit commercially, you want huge yields. You want all your fruit to ripen at the same, or like you want to have ripening windows so that you can have your workers come, harvest, next week, another crew, harvest. It needs to be really calculated. Harvesting, we want our, today, trees are growing flat. They're two-dimensional so that you can have those vacuum robots go in there and just suck all that fruit right off the tree. Storage and transportation, as we mentioned, like the longer that fruit stays viable and good, stored, the more market value it has. Thick skin, less bruise. We want that in the grocery stores. And so essentially fruit is designed, and what we find out about growing fruit, if you've ever looked online for information on what's going on in my fruit tree or what does it need, you're finding information that is about the mechanization of production. When are you supposed to, like, Google, how often do I fertilize my citrus? Or look at the instructions on the back of citrus fertilization, a fertilizer bag. It's going to tell you to give like a pound per inch caliper of trunk every quarter or something like that. And that's what, yeah, you should do that on an orchard. But if you do that in your backyard, you're going to completely nitrify your soil. On an orchard, they're going to do that. And then they're going to put another product in to balance the pH. And then they're going to put another product in to get the calcium, and all of it's so calculated and mechanized. Whereas for residential fruit trees, they're much more nuanced, but like some stark differences. And this really needs to be your approach to trees. So residential fruit trees, they're for shade, they're for privacy. We need them to be pretty. You know, we don't need a row of flat two-dimensional trees unless you want to have a fancy fruit feature in your landscape and a nice espalier. You want trees to give you shade. You want trees to create privacy screens in your property perimeters. You want a fruit tree to do those things as well as give you fruit. You don't want all your fruit to be ripe at one time. You don't want to have a week where you have to pick all your apricots and then you have to process them all so that they stay, you know, lots and lots of jams. You want trees with extended ripening times. You want, avocados are great because they ripen off the tree. So you've got like a long harvest time. You also don't need the yields of a commercial grower. I think if somebody was grafting trees for residential industry, stone fruit would have a smaller yield capacity, but you don't need the same kind of fruit that any orchard does. You want enough for you, yours, your neighbors. I hope all of you with fruit trees are exchanging your fruit. But I think one of the stark differences between residential and commercial grown fruit trees is you want your trees to last. You need to keep your trees healthy. You're not growing them to pump out fruit. You want them to raise your property value over time. You want them to be there for 3 generations. And you can do that with citrus. You can do that with most fruit trees if you do the right things. You know what to do. And they formative pruning, feed them if you care for them. Fruit trees can last for a while. On the books, however, because they're written by scientists and economists, viability of a fruit tree is 30, 40 years. And I think most of us who live in Los Angeles know that there's fruit trees that are still producing that are very, very old. So I think that fruit trees in the residential landscape are also about property value, but it's more about increasing the equity of my home. And who doesn't love like a happy, healthy Meyer lemon? If you're selling your house, new homeowners or buyers walk in, this is a beautiful tree that gives me fruit. It's a net plus. So unfortunately, and what I come up against and what my business is working to do is to we have to write a new book. We have to create a new industry practice on managing residential fruit trees. And I think that we need, this is kind of goes in line with a fundamental flaw or issue with current landscape management, is that most of us aren't so well, like most people, landscape professionals, they're not growing plants. And so they don't think about the purpose of all the different plants that get put in a landscape. Again, I think that we need to know our plants to grow our plants. And that is, you know, the problem number one is this kind of approach to landscape and to actually think about growing things. And to do that, you need to, for example, like know that fruit trees need to be pruned and fed, and that planting natives next to fruit trees require a lot, it's more intense. It's going to be much more intensive to soil management. I think that where we're at now, it's time for us to have a more ecological approach to landscape management and to think about like proper plant things according to irrigation needs, so that we have a high water zone and a low water zone, and we don't have to have this complicated mess, or things, not everything gets overwatered or underwatered. So personally, I would like to see these basic understandings about fruit trees become more common, because believe me, there's plenty of fruit trees in Los Angeles that need work, and I don't want to be doing this business for forever. So the more everyone knows about fruit trees, the healthier, happier those trees are going to be, and the more fruits there's going to be for everyone in LA. But I think yeah, we have some reframing to do as far as us as landscape professionals, and thinking about how do we grow a healthy, successful, ecologically sound landscape. So, and then there's more fruit for everyone. So, ready for questions?
Thank you, Joanna. Before we
Yeah.
get started with questions, it is 8:30. So if anyone has to,
I thought we had till 8:45. Sorry.
no worries. Yeah, we
I
can
totally
stay. We can stay a little longer for questions, but I do want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And if you do have to go, please note that the rest of the entire presentation will be available on our YouTube channel by this weekend. And you can also find all of our replays at our website at socalhort.org.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Before we continue with our Q&A, we are going to do our door prize raffle. So let's get that going. All right, and if you are the winner, please raise your hand if you're here, okay? Beverly A, are you here with us? Let's see. Beverly, I don't see Beverly's hand raised. Okay, so we're going to do another spin. Hopefully they are here. All right, just like last month, third time's a charm. Mary Lou V, are you here with us? Let's see. Mary Lou, ooh, I see a different Mary Lou. I'm sorry. Okay, this will be the last try. If you're here, you're here. If you're not, well, next time.
I'll take it.
All right.
No, I'm kidding. I don't need any more pruning styles. I've got plenty.
Hope. I have hope for you. Hope, yay! You are. I'm glad we went for the 4th try, and thank you for joining us tonight. You will be receiving an email from me later on, so keep an eye out for that, okay? And again, thank you everyone who has joined. Make sure to mark your calendars for next month. On Thursday, August 12th, we will be having our next meeting with Jill Morganelli, who is an instructor with the UCLA Extension Horticulture program. And she's going to be talking about gardening tools. So make sure to mark your calendars for that. And of course, keep an eye out for our updates on our website and our social media. And the last bit, if you've enjoyed any part of tonight or any of the content that we've shared online, please feel free to donate whatever you can to our organization. We're hoping to have an in-person auction at the end of this year. It is still to be confirmed, but that is our annual fundraiser. So without having had that last year, we do appreciate any donations of any size, whatever you feel you can contribute. That is awesome. If not, you just joining us and being a part of the society makes us equally as happy as well, because we love to share our knowledge and the knowledge of the experts that we bring on as well. So with that said, we can continue with any Q&A. I do see that we have some. And I have one, this is actually a comment from Jerry from earlier. Chipdrop.com will deliver often for free. Ask for ramial wood chips. So speaking about those wood chips, this one's from Tessa. Can you grow a lemon tree in the middle of a lawn?
Tessa, it depends on the lawn. Yes, you can generally. Yeah, go for it. I'd say so. But again, just know you got to prune it right and feed it often.
And this one's from Karen. What is the best time of year to prune citrus trees? Is there an optimal time to feed with compost?
So pruning, and we're going to obviously be delving all into this on Sunday's workshop, but pruning depends on what the tree needs. Generally, the best time of year to prune anything is in the winter, because it's less prone to disease and pests. But again, it depends on how the tree's doing. Best time to feed with compost and mulch, whenever. You can always do it with compost. One thing with compost and mulch is that you don't want to create a top dressing that's too thick, because you'll be smothering the absorbent roots, because there won't be enough oxygen in that soil where they live. That being said, trees undergo flushes of root growth in the spring and in the fall. So that's generally when they're hungriest, and that's the best time to feed them. Carol, oh, sorry, keep going.
Oh, go for it.
The Grow Your Own Mini Fruit Gardening. I love that book. I highly recommend it. That one, and the Home Orchard publication, UC Extension.
And this I will be sharing in the comments right now as well for anyone, if you want a copy of that book. Thank you, Carol. The next question is from Charles. What is the correct amount of water for orange, grapefruit, and avocado trees?
Charles, I don't know. No, it depends. I mean, irrigation is so specific, but I can tell you avocados need more irrigation than grapefruit and oranges. And how much water your trees need is going to be different than how much water your neighbor's trees need. Even if they have the same trees planted in the same spacing, it's soil, it's sun exposure, it's wind, it's irrigation equipment. It's huge. There is no one size fits all for irrigation. If anybody wants irrigation information, we did like a short 2-minute video on how to properly irrigate a fruit tree that you can, if you Google Fruitstitute on YouTube, you can find that. We are actually, because of the drought, Food Forward and Fruitstitute, we're putting out a collaborative fruit tree care information we're kind of going heavy on irrigation this summer because it is so important that we help our trees through the drought and through the summer heat.
Exactly. And actually that video that you're talking about, Joanna, I did share on our social media. So
Oh,
if you
good.
guys
Okay, cool.
page, we will definitely have that. And I am also searching for your YouTube channel right now so that I can share that in the comments.
Okay. Yeah. In that video, it's not going to tell you how much water your trees need either. It's just going to tell you how to do it. What's the proper irrigation?
And it will show you how to measure the root zone too.
Exactly. Exactly.
The next question is from Gina. It's a compost question.
Yes.
So bagged compost is of no value?
I don't know. I don't think, I mean, no, it depends. But in general, the principle of compost is that you're putting biology into your soil. So biology is alive. Soil microbes need air and water. Bagged in plastic, I don't know how you keep things alive. But maybe somebody's come up with a really great way to do it. I think that these things are going to be evolving and that the science behind it is just getting better and better. So I have hope. But I think I'd be skeptical and I would definitely do my research.
The next question is from Cynthia. Can I grow a peach tree from a pit? How long does it take a loquat tree to bear fruit? So 2 questions.
Yeah, Cynthia, you can certainly grow a peach tree from a pit. Will it be that peach? Nope, it's not. How long will it take a loquat to bear fruit? Loquats you can plant from seed for sure. How long does it take to bear fruit? That I don't know, but they're relatively quick growers. But they're not really trees that we work on because they don't need us. They're fine. They can't they do just fine on their own.
All right, and the next question is from Gina again, but this time it's about fertilizer. You mentioned you don't fertilize the first year it's installed. What do you put in the hole at planting?
Nothing but native soil or compost. So basically planting holes, and I say this all the time, if you put nice fancy potting soil in your planting hole, those roots are going to get in there. They're going to love this soil. They're going to hate your native soil, and they're already trained to grow circularly because they've been in that container, and they're going to hit that native soil and they're going to continue to grow circularly and eventually choke themselves out. So the only thing you want to put into the soil at planting time is something that's going to amend your soil, which is compost. So there's no such thing as bad soil. There's only soil that needs more work than others. When you're digging your planting hole, generally, unless you have a good source of compost, you just you can spend some biochar is a really great way to build soil structure. You can throw that in there. But yeah, you don't want to fake the tree out, so to speak, because it's not gonna establish its roots. It's got to know where it really is and adapt.
And we got a comment from Jean about loquats from seeds. It took her 3.5 to 4 years to start putting our flowers.
Cool. Good to know. Thanks, Jane.
And then the next question is from Laura. I've worked with a previously neglected desert gold peach at a school garden for 2 years. The fruit is just not very good, watery and mealy. We've been mulching and composting for a year. Can I hope that the fruit quality will improve with the health of the tree?
Without a doubt, yes. The more water and nutrients the tree takes up, the more nutrition gets into your fruit. What creates flavor profiles in your fruit? Nutrients. So just keep working that soil. Definitely bring your compost and mulch out as far as you can. Stone fruit needs to be pruned. So if you do a heavy dormant pruning on that tree, you will improve the fruit production next season. And then thin the fruit. You need to thin it to win it, is what I like to say. Because when you thin it, there's more nutrients to grow to less fruit. So the rule of thumb is basically like you want that much space in between the fruit for stone fruit. And if a branch can't support its weight, it doesn't have the energy to bring that fruit to maturity.
All right, thank you. We
Yeah,
have
thanks.
one
Good
from,
questions, guys. Thank
we have
you.
another from Lorene. I have a satsuma in between a healthy productive orange tree and a grapefruit tree that is striving for sun. Same for a long productive lemon tree dwarfed by a volunteer oak tree. Anything I can do to save that satsuma?
You prune your lemon and orange. Sorry, lemon and grapefruit, whatever it's in between. Fruit trees, the beautiful thing, they're malleable. So you can reduce them. You don't want to take 20, 30% of a tree off, like 20%, 25% max you want to do at one time. And again, if you don't know how to properly prune a tree, that's how you can kill a tree. So make sure that you have professionals do it, or you know what to do. But yeah, that's the only way to save the satsuma, is to change the two trees that are shading it, or transplant it if possible. But after a year in the ground, we generally, I mean, you can always transplant, but sometimes it's cheaper to just get a new tree.
We do have two more questions and then we will end the webinar. So we
Great.
thank you for all your time so far and all your great answers as well. This one's from Susan. Do you thin citrus fruits?
No, citrus self thins. You would want to thin citrus fruit on young trees so that the tree can divert that energy into root establishment. But generally, or on trees that are sick and not doing well. But generally, citrus, because they self thin, they will drop what they don't have the nutrients to bring to maturity. Oftentimes, if it takes a really long time for citrus fruit to ripen on the tree, that's also when you want to thin, because that means that it's kind of striving to grab as much nutrients as it can. And you can really help it along by thinning some of those fruit.
All right, and the last question is from Tessa. How do you get fruit trees to fruit if they haven't for a few years?
Tessa, it depends. It depends on the tree, but get proper care. Like, it's stone fruit. I always like to say the Latin genus of stone fruit is Prunus. That means prune us. Stone fruit need dormant pruning to be productive over the years. Most of them need summer pruning as well. If citrus, if it hasn't fruited in a while, that's generally a soil issue. The avocados, if they're not fruiting ever, there's some tricks that you can do, that like girdling branches that kind of like shocks the system. But again, these are like technical things that you shouldn't do unless you know how to do them properly. And if you do, go for it. And if you don't, come to the workshops or call Fruitstitute, or do your research. But I think it's also really important, if you do your research, to be mindful of who the audience is that author is writing to. Don't put 5 pounds of fertilizer on, any of your fruit trees ever at one time.
Well, thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. If you were interested in joining our citrus pruning workshop this weekend, we are sold out now. However, Fruitstitute is holding Citrus 101 workshops starting July 18th. Did you want to mention anything about that, Joanna?
Sure. Yeah, this is a new thing that we're doing. Arlington Gardens has a beautiful citrus grove. Those trees need some love. And so my team is doing a Citrus 101 care workshop series. So we're doing them every other week. There's probably going to be about 9 or 10, but we're going to do them until we get those trees pruned. It's also an opportunity for me to train my team in teaching workshops, because we need to get the word out. So I'm teaching obviously the one on Sunday, and for the Southern California Horticultural Society, but I won't be teaching all of them. But it's going to be awesome. And so there's a few. So you can go to the website, my website, to get the information. I'm sure you can probably send the links out, but yeah, it's not hard to find if you want to register.
Exactly. And then we will share that with our followers too, throughout our social media so that they can find it when they need it.
Cool.
And we thank you again.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Your workshop, if this presentation is any signal of how the workshop will go, you've already gotten great remarks and people have loved it so far. So I know the workshop's going to be really fun and very informative too. So thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Well, good. Well, we will see everyone next month or this weekend at the workshop.
Great.
Have a good
Yeah,
night.
hope to see you there. Bye.